Welcome to Envirocast podcast, and on this episode, we bring you one of a kind as we get to share opinions on the Opinion Lounge.
Welcome to Envirocast Podcast, a young environmental voices podcast, meaningful engagements for young people.
Today, I'm joined by quite a number of people. I have Faith Reaper, who's coming from Rafokombe Girls Secondary School, and she is a pupil who's going to give us a different perspective of the conversation today. I have George Kande, who's also a student and an environmental advocate who advocates for the environment, especially when it comes to issues around lead. Sula Nyangwe is a student and as well as somebody who's been so passionate about the environment and will be able to share opinions today on this episode. Remember, you can find us on different social media platforms, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and X, for you to be able to follow the conversation and you'll be able to have all this and many, many other conversations that we get to hold on this platform. My name is Cloud Piri, and I'll be your host for today's Opinion Lounge. Let's start the conversation. I'm starting with you, Faith. Let's try to set the notes. Already we've seen the government introduce a new curriculum, which we've seen the introduction of the environmental studies. Wanted to focus on the environment specifically. Do you think this is a step towards ensuring that people get to do the right thing on the environment?
To be honest, I think it's a really, really good effort by the government to just introduce environmental studies, not just a subtopic in geography, but just a subject on its own. And unlike geography, whereby some only a few people take it, environmental studies will be taken by a lot of pupils in Zambia, and it's a really, really good effort by the government.
George, unfortunate for you, you're not be able to go through the same curriculum. But obviously, we've seen a lot of conversations around the fact that it's the humans that get to contribute to the environmental challenges that we get to see. What's your thought around not having information? And now that we've seen an introduction of a subject like this, do you think we can entirely blame it on the human beings as a result of the droughts that we've seen, the floods in different countries?
It's a yes or no question for me. Because on the yes side, you find that people who do not have the information genuinely do not do something about it because they do not know to what extent damaging the environment can be and how it can affect them. And then the no part comes in whereby we have people who actually have the information but choose to disregard it because they are being somewhat having maybe some form of profit from just the environmental degradation, and know that we have people who are CEOs of big mining firms who wouldn't want such things to happen, CEOs of big energy industries who wouldn't want such things to happen. So it's a yes or no for me.
So I would want you to weigh in, but look at this point. We have situations where, let's say, the government would say we're banning the use of charcoal in different areas, and why we're doing this, it's because of the environment, right? But then community members might not have access to maybe cheap renewable energy that they can run into. Do you, using that narrative, do you think we could entirely blame the environmental issues on human beings?
Yes, because we cannot take away the fact that every activity that we tend to do still has a big effect on the environment. The government has tried by all means to suggest these things, and I think they just don't end on suggesting. They also come up with initiatives where they get to teach communities, they get to engage and whatnot. So if they've said we are banning charcoal, and then they've not just implemented, they've just not forced it on us. They've also given us a solution, which is renewable resources, right? So meaning it is up to us to take it or not. People are just negligent when it comes to these things. They just don't want to try. And I think it's because people are ignorant and they just don't want to try new things. But it does not take away the fact that those activities are the reason why we are facing this situation right now.
I think starting from Faith up until what you've just added up, Sula, you've all mentioned the government and human beings. Who has a role to play on both? Is it an issue of ignorance? Let me start with you, George. Do you think it's as a result of people being ignorant or the government doing nothing about it? who could we sort of give a huge blame? Who do we blame on it?
Well, it's everyone has a role to play in this.
To be specific between the two.
Between the two,
Yeah.
I could give the government sort of a larger portion of the blame because these are people who are supposed to be enforcing these policies that they are signing into, because these are people that are well informed of what we're signing into. Sometimes the people you lead do not know the benefits of what you are doing, and not until a certain age has passed or not until something has happened. So it is very, very important as you as a leader to somewhat just weigh in on what is best for the people you are leading. And at that point, it is protecting the environment, because you try and say, okay, well, let's protect our economies. Our economies will be okay,
Yeah.
but our environments won't be okay. What will that mean? We will not have a future. We'll have a healthy economy, a bad environment. We will not have a future in this country. So it's better we have a bad economy which we can fix later on, rather than a good economy and then a bad environment whereby we do not even have a future to look forward to enjoying that good economy.
I'm thinking, I'm looking at this in this way, George. You talk of having to have a better environment and also ending up having an economy that we can fix at some point. But look, mining contributes 70% of our GDP, which is massively, it's beyond 50%. So maybe you would want to come in on that.
Yes. On that note, I think I respectfully disagree, because I think it's not entirely the government's issue.
Yeah.
It also it's everyone. We get to blame everyone, you get, right? Because what do I mean? We experienced droughts in 2023.
Yeah.
And that issue was everywhere. I mean, social media, even people that are not on phones knew about this issue, right? And then most of the questions that we're asking ourselves, why do we have droughts?
Yeah.
That is the time when environmental issues came to place. That is when we saw advocates coming on board. So people now understand that the activities that they're doing actually contribute to what's happening, to climate change. So if we blame the government, we're also taking away the humans should be accountable for their actions. Let's be accountable for our actions. So we can't entirely blame the government. Also, when you say that we can fix the economy,
Yeah.
I think that would also be wrong. What if we meet in between, where we have a good economy, but while maintaining a good environment? What do I mean? The government or the country largely depend on tax. That is our primary source of resources. So we cannot blame the government for putting it first. But then what I'm trying to say is that we can reach a point where climate change meets economic growth.
Sounds like a nice meeting point. Josh Kande, I think in under 30 seconds, what would you think would work in an event we were to, away from the fact that we have activities that would affect the environment,
Yeah.
what then would you suggest would work, fix the economy, away from such activities?
Well, fixing the economy, it would be a broad thing, but all in all, we would have to look at how sustainable energy and just having a better environment, a sustainable environment, and how to gain money from that. Most people haven't looked at it in that particular way. We are going at this in the old traditional way, which we have inherited for centuries now. And this whole green, sustainable thing is sort of a new thing to most of us, and people are finding it hard to adapt to it. It is something that is hard to adapt, but it is adaptable. Like, for example, we look at charcoal burners. Of course, charcoal burners do have a source of income from that charcoal, but that charcoal is damaging the
environment at the end of the day.
and we cannot just shy away from that. So it is better to introduce these charcoal burners to something like forming those charcoal blocks or something,
Yeah.
teaching them how to do that, and they could also have a good source of income, but in a more sustainable way.
I think we'll be able to get you some of the solutions. Now, Faith, you have a voice and yet you're a child, right? Do you think currently, as we get to discuss issues around the environment, do you have spaces that allow you be able to contribute and also having to have your contribution realized at the end of the process?
Well, yes, there are platforms that allow me to contribute. Yeah,
Are they working?
well, most of the times they work, sometimes they don't. So it's kind of a 50-50. Yeah.
And now that you have environmental education, one that will be able to teach you about the environment and so on, do you think now we need to sort of set more platforms for young people to be able to voice out and also look forward to that change?
Yeah, yeah. There should be more opportunities, more platforms, especially now with the introduction of the new curriculum, as you have put it. Yeah, so more platforms, more voices. The government should hear us out because if maybe, for example, I'm a child only, like I'm just one. If I say my voice, maybe the government won't put much attention to that. But maybe if we're a lot, the government would definitely say that, okay, children are not happy, they're upset, we must do something about it.
To get to the numbers, what do you think should be done?
More platforms should be put in place and platforms that are heard. Yeah, platforms that are powerful. More children should be engaged in one of these engagements, like right now.
Right. I think one thing that you've mentioned, Faith, as well as George, Sula, you touched it a little bit, is with regards to ensuring that we get to have platforms.
Yeah.
Could social media, for example, be a platform where you could sort of amplify voices around what's happening on the environment? And could it be something that we as youths get to use to voice out even higher on issues that are affecting the environment? George.
Social media right now is a very, very big tool that youths are currently using to voice out. Coming from this past generation, our parents and the like, the way they used to voice out is going into the streets, demonstrating, doing all those things. But why we do not see it from the youths, it's not that they are not patriotic, but they have a different and more modern way of doing it.
Oh.
Social media, you create Zoom meetings where you meet with different youths and concur with them to say, okay, we need this and this a change to happen, and we need to target this person and this person. And sometimes you can even say, for us to make sure that this person is reached, make sure you tag them. And throughout the comments, you just be seeing, for example, if I want to say, okay, there's this issue of lead and I want the president to be involved. I have tagged him. I'm asking every single youth who sees this to also tag the president.
But is that working?
At some point, it does work because we have seen engagements from the people who have been, sort of reached out like that. So I've not tried it personally, but I've seen the effects of how using social media as a platform
work.
can be. Yeah.
Faith, we've seen a number of people on social media platforms. And obviously, like George had indicated, that are using these platforms to ensure that they get to have conversations and hold meaningful conversations. How best could we use it differently to ensure that our voices are amplified and also we get to a point where the intended person gets the information at the end of it all?
Well, for me, honestly, I would think of maybe inviting some officials because once something or maybe an official is invited, that means that thing is official. Because many of the times whereby you go maybe on Facebook, you read something and it's false.
Okay.
Yeah.
Having to ensure that what you're getting to is actually correct. Yes. So you've been part of platforms where civic leaders that are in charge of making the change are part of a conversation, and young people are there and holding them to account and indicating, look, these are the problems. And yet we haven't seen the response. George talks about social media. Well, we've seen people tag prominent people like the president to constantly work on a few things, or maybe things that are affecting the environment, for example, and yet we haven't seen response. With regards to the platforms, how best could we be able to utilize them to ensure that we get response at the end of the day?
I think, like he mentioned, mentioning them works, but is not all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you find that even though you tag them, they don't respond, they don't follow, they don't like, and whatnot. What really matters is that you voice out.
What could be
And the problem is that the government doesn't, sometimes they don't really want to be accountable for their actions. Yes, and also sometimes it's because they do not have the answers or they just don't want to act upon it. But best believe they do see the messages. And as an advocate, it's more about ensuring that they get it. So as long as they've seen that video, they've seen that content, even if they don't act on it, we know when we address or we have an engagement like this one, we can still go back to that post and say, hey, I posted this. I tagged the president. He did not respond to this. You get what I mean? So the content is always there, even though they don't act on it. we have a reference point even when we say, look, we've engaged you so many times, but you haven't responded. So social media is really a good tool that we need to utilize, because not only does it preserve our content, it also ensures that even when we get on the ground and we're doing it and they're not doing anything, we can still go back to it that we've been doing this consistently, but you haven't been doing anything. It also helps them be accountable, because the more you do it, the more they realize that this is a really pressing issue that needs to be dealt with, and our people will not stop until we do it.
In your opinion, what do you think are the barriers? Do you think it's due to lack of political will that we get to see them run away from the fact that, look, these are problems that people are facing? What could be the barriers as to not having to act on them?
Yes, that is, I think political will contributes, and also lack of coordination, and also the fact that we have this government, but let's not shine away from the. I don't want to sound political, but let me just say this the way it is, plainly. I'll give an example of the mayor, right? I believe the mayor is from another party, even though he's serving in this government. So we've had engagements with him, and he has heard. He has taken, I think, the previous debate that we had, the Green Voice debate, we had an opportunity to get information from him, and he accepted. There's that accountability, answering to their actions, but it becomes very difficult for him to act on it if it's not in the policy, it's not on paper, right? And I feel like the government just wants to act bureaucratic. That's what the problem is. When it comes to issues and they need to act, they tend to be democratic. When they want information from us, they're very democratic, trust me. So yeah.
Yeah, Faith, you talked about the government listening to some of the content that is produced on social media, for example, and I asked whether it could work for young people. What are some of the challenges that are leading to them not responding? Look, these are conversations that we've held before. These are conversations that other people could have held before. What do we do now to ensure that we prevent having the same conversations over and over? How do we press a button for them to be able to respond to these issues?
Well, I would concur with her, because if you tag someone and you want them to listen to you, and then they're just not listening to you, just get angry and you just stop. You just stop. So I would really love it if the government would just listen to us, would hear us out, and would give us space to air out our views, because we can be talking about one and the same thing every time, but the people who we're directing it to are just plainly ignoring us.
George, this question will sound a little bit strange to respond to, but look at this. We've seen situations where, I'll give an example of the COVID situation, 2019, where we saw different governments across the world on their toes trying to ensure that they get to provide solutions. We're talking about the environment today. Is it a very small issue that we see a few people paying attention to it? We see a few people getting on their toes? How big of an issue is the issue of the environment, and how urgent should indications be around it in trying to address the issues?
When it comes to the issue of the environment is a very, very big issue, but the only challenge comes in whereby the environment is more of an invisible problem, if I can put it like that. It is not something that people can put two and two together just like that to solve it out. Because for COVID-19, people were like, okay, COVID comes, it kills somebody, the life is lost. But for climate change, for example, it comes in different forms, and it is very, very difficult for people to just map out to say it is actually climate change.
Or maybe we need to wait for another drought.
No. So you find that people, for example, like we had the El Nino last year, some people were even linking it to spirituality. I don't even know how it came by. No, God, Shanoko, things like that. So people tend to find it difficult to just map it back to climate change. It is very different from the COVID aspect, but it is very, very important. The environment is very, very important. It's something that is invisible.
All right, this is the Invalcast podcast, and this is the Opinion Lounge, and we're sharing ideas around so many issues that affect the environment in Kawa and in Zambia at large. And at this particular moment, I want us to be able to create, of our opinions, what could work 5 years down the line. And why I say so is, look, we have the Sustainable Development Goals that should come to an end in 2030, and yet we still see environmental issues that are still ongoing, and others are happening right now, and we will not be able to see, maybe we'll not be able to see them come to a change. Maybe we'll be able to see them come to a change, right? In the next 5 years, what do you think has to be done for us to be able to create a proper environment that allows economic activities to run and also allow the environment to exist in its natural way? Sula.
Okay, I think at some point I mentioned this. The government should really do a good job when it comes to ensuring that people understand the effects of their actions, And then also, for us to have a sustainable environment, the government also needs to ensure that the policies that they've put in place are actually working.
Yeah.
Look at how the government have put in so much effort in the cyber law. Imagine if the same energy was diverted into environmental issues, the impact they would make, right? So what the government should do is that it should not neglect the fact that this is a very serious issue and just look at the economic aspect. They should ensure that the policies that they have put in place are actually enforced, because at the end of the day, the government has the right to say, if we find you selling charcoal, you're going to save, or there's a fine attached to that. It shouldn't just be about opinions and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then number two, what the government can do is also regulate briefly. Number two, briefly, what the government can also do is ensure that it bridges the gap between economic barriers and the environmental issues that we are facing. What do I mean? They should ensure that they create initiatives that will not only be sustainable in the short run, because 5 years is not only, but then the question is, after 5 years, what happens? After 2030, what happens? Those are the things that the government should be working on right now. We do not need new policies. We do not need anything new. We already have the things in place.
Yeah.
Let's just actualize them.
George, in 5 years, and I know George is a man of a lot of words, and maybe briefly as we get to, I know 5 years is a lot of time. Yeah. What should be done to achieve that?
First, I think it's awareness. Now, awareness for me, I'll put it in different sectors. Awareness in terms of the people who do not know what climate change is and the effects of climate change. And then awareness also comes to the leaders. Now, it is very interesting, our leaders at national level, international level, most of them do not know their roles. You will approach a leader, ask him for something, and then he will say, no, that is not my responsibility, approach this one. And then that you go and approach that person, and then they'll say, no, this is not my responsibility. Most of our leaders do not know what their roles are, and what their responsibilities are. So it is a matter of leaders knowing what their responsibilities are from top to bottom. The president of the country knows what his role is. He says, okay, I'm going to implement a task force for the lead issue in Kawe. He implements it. He just says it like that.
Yeah.
And then it is up to other people now to take it up. Now, those people who must take it up did not know their roles and hence did not take it up. And that's why we do not have a task force 2 years after the president said so.
Better indication. Yes. You unfortunately will not be able to get a part of the new curriculum, but obviously understanding that you've seen environmental education coming to play. What do you think has to be done, riding on what George has indicated with regards to, having to have the know-how and having the knowledge on the environment, and also building on Sula's thought? What do you think should be done in terms of trying to just go through the subject itself? What should be done to ensure that the children get to understand that this is what is happening and this is what we have to do and work on the things as they get to go?
Well, for the subject itself, I think teachers should show their students or pupils what is really affecting the environment. Like people usually tend to believe once they see something than once they hear it. So they say seeing is believing. So once they see it, they'll be like, okay, this is what happening to our environment. We should do something about it. Yeah. So and also for the government itself, I really like what Sila said. There should be strict enforcement for those who try to destroy our environment. Everyone should be held accountable, honestly.
All right, this is a home for such conversations. We understand that you, as a youth out there, might have and should have, and you have, we know, the solutions to some of Zambia's environmental challenges. Be sure to leave your opinions in the comment. This has been the Opinion Lounge right here on the Envirocast podcast. I was joined by Faith Luipa. Thank you so much for being part of the program today.
Thank you.
George Kande on the other side. Thank you so much for being part of this episode.
Thank you so much.
Last but not the least, Sula Nyangwe, great to have you on the program as well.
Thank you very much.
All right, be sure to follow us on our different social media platforms, X, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok, so as to be able to get part of this conversation. Remember to drop a comment on some of the solutions and opinions that you have on the discussion that we shared today. I've been your host, Cloud Piri. It's bye for now.